She took the job to survive, but never imagined her arrogant boss would be the man to change her life forever. Before we begin the story, where are you watching from? Comment below and enjoy. Lena Harper stood outside the towering black iron gate of the Caldwell estate, clutching her coat tighter against the morning chill. The mansion beyond looked like something out of a movie, grand, cold, and way out of her league. But she wasn't here to admire the architecture. She needed the job. After losing her apartment, her part-time gig at the diner, and her last bit of pride, cleaning houses was the only option left. When the agency sent her to clean for Jace Caldwell, the notoriously difficult CEO of Caldwell Tech, she almost said no. But desperation had a funny way of silencing your pride. The gates creaked open slowly, almost like they were mocking her. Lena stepped inside, her worn boots sinking slightly into the perfectly manicured gravel path. A camera above shifted with her every step, reminding her that she didn't belong. When she reached the front door, a man opened it before she could knock. He was tall, sharply dressed, in a charcoal sweater and slacks, with piercing, icy blue eyes that looked through her, not at her. "You're late," he said flatly, checking his watch without a hint of warmth. Lena straightened her back, swallowing her nerves. "Only by 2 minutes." He turned and walked back inside without another word, leaving the door wide open behind him. This was going to be harder than she thought. But she needed this job more than she needed to be respected. So she stepped in after him, unaware that this was the first step into a story that would change everything, including the man who just walked away. The inside of the mansion was as cold as its owner. Marble floors, steel fixtures, and furniture too expensive to touch. Lena stood in the grand hallway, clutching her cleaning bag like a lifeline. Jace disappeared down a corridor without even acknowledging her, his footsteps echoing behind him. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to follow, wait, or just start working. There were no instructions, no warmth, just that glare in his gruff voice. She sighed and took a cautious step forward, glancing at the gleaming surfaces. Everything already looked clean. Why did he even need a cleaner? Maybe this was a power trip, some rich man's way of reminding himself he owned everything and everyone under his roof. Eventually, she heard his voice from another room. "The kitchen, now." Lena flinched. She dropped her bag and hurried to the kitchen, where he stood leaning against the counter with a glass of water in hand. His eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. "You clean? Don't touch my office? Don't go upstairs? I work from home, so stay quiet." She raised an eyebrow, already feeling her blood heat. "Noted, sir." He didn't react to her sarcasm. He simply turned, leaving the glass on the counter and vanishing again. As soon as he was gone, Lena let out a frustrated breath. If this was going to be her daily reality, she'd have to find a way to survive his icy attitude. Maybe he was just one of those people who didn't know how to be kind, or maybe he was used to people fearing him. Either way, she'd clean his house, but she sure as hell wouldn't let him walk all over her. Not for any paycheck. Lena worked her way through the kitchen, scrubbing countertops that were already spotless and wiping down appliances that probably hadn't been touched in days. It was busy work, clearly, but she wasn't about to give him any reason to complain. The silence in the house was almost eerie. No music, no TV, not even the faint sound of typing or a phone call. Just silence and the occasional creak of a floorboard. As she moved toward the living room, she caught a glimpse of Jace through the glass doors of his home office. He was sitting at his desk, hunched slightly, a hand rubbing his temple. His expression looked tired, more human than anything he'd shown her so far. His suit jacket hung on the back of his chair, and the sleeves of his shirt were rolled up to the elbows. For a brief moment, he looked like a man carrying more than he let on. She quickly looked away. The last thing she needed was to get caught staring. By noon, Lena's stomach grumbled. She hadn't eaten all day, and she wasn't sure if she was even allowed to take a break. She quietly pulled out the small sandwich she'd stuffed in her coat pocket and sat at the far end of the kitchen. Just as she unwrapped it, Jace appeared. "You eatin'?" She looked up, startled. "5-minute break," she said, trying to stay calm. He studied her for a moment, then walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. "You always ask permission before taking care of yourself?" She blinked. Was that a joke? "No," she replied, "but you don't exactly give off welcoming vibes." To her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted, just a little. "Then maybe you're not as soft as I thought." And with that, he walked away, leaving her stunned in silence. The next day, Lena arrived 10 minutes early. She didn't want to give Jace any more ammunition than he already had. As she entered through the side entrance, per his new instructions, she found a sticky note waiting for her on the kitchen counter. It read, "Clean, downstairs study." Don't move anything on the desk. Short and cold. Classic Jace. The study was tucked away near the back of the mansion. It smelled of expensive leather and aged paper. Mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with thick hardbacks, philosophy, finance, history, and a surprising number of classic novels. She hadn't pegged him for the literary type. She moved carefully, dusting shelves and wiping window panes, avoiding the large glass-topped desk as instructed. Still, her eyes were drawn to the papers scattered across it. Most were spreadsheets and architectural designs, but one thing stood out. A photo frame, lying face down. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up. A younger Jay smiled in the picture, holding a woman with long chestnut hair and soft eyes. They looked happy, genuinely so. It was the first real emotion she'd ever seen on his face. She quickly set it back down when she heard footsteps. Chase entered the room, stopping in the doorway. His eyes darted to the desk, then to her. "You touched it, didn't you?" "Lena, the lie. Yes, just the photo. It was already face down." His jaw tightened, but he didn't lash out. Instead, he stepped forward and turned the frame fully toward him. "She's gone," he said quietly. "That's why it was face down." Lena's chest tightened. She hadn't expected vulnerability. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He gave a single nod, then walked past her, brushing away the dust on the bookshelf with his hand as if trying to distract himself. The air between them shifted, still cold, but no longer empty. It was a rainy Thursday when Lena returned for her shift. Thunder rumbled in the distance as gray clouds draped over the sky, casting the mansion in a somber hue. She knocked once, out of habit, then let herself in, dripping from the rain. As she slipped off her coat, she heard his voice. Calmer than usual. "You could have called in. The storm's bad." Lena blinked. Was that and miss out on getting scolded for being late again? "Not a chance," she quipped, shaking out her damp hair. Jay smirked faintly but said nothing more. Instead, he handed her a clean towel. "Dry off. You'll catch something." She hesitated before taking it, surprised by the small gesture. She wiped her face and arms as he turned and walked toward the hallway. "Come to the library after you're done in the den," he said over his shoulder. "The library?" "Yes, you do know what that is, right?" She rolled her eyes behind his back, but didn't argue. The den didn't take long, just a quick dust and vacuum. And by the time she reached the library, Jace was standing by the window, sipping coffee, watching the rain fall. He motioned to a chair across from him. "Sit. Just for a few minutes." Lena hesitated, confused. This wasn't like him. She slowly sat down, feeling awkward under his gaze. I don't usually like people in my space," he began, voice low. "But you're different. You don't tiptoe around me." "Should I?" she asked carefully. "No, that's the point." A beat passed in silence. Outside, rain tapped gently on the glass. Inside, something unspoken lingered in the air. Not quite tension, not quite comfort. Just possibility. The next few days slipped into an odd rhythm. Lena no longer felt like just the cleaner. Jay started appearing more often, lingering near whatever room she worked in, always under the guise of needing something, a folder, a glass of water, a phone charger. But she wasn't stupid. She noticed, and maybe she didn't mind. Still, she reminded herself that this was just a job. She was paid to clean, not to exchange glances or play house with a man who still hadn't said one nice thing outright. Even so, the library chat stayed with her, playing in her mind like a melody she couldn't forget. One morning, she arrived to find a post-it note on the kitchen counter again, but this time it read, "Coffee's on the stove. Thought you'd need it today." She stared at the note like it was written in another language. Coffee? For her? The man who barked orders and frowned as if it were his default setting? She poured a mug and took a cautious sip. It was perfect, strong, a little sweet, and laced with something she couldn't name. That same morning, while dusting the staircase railings, she noticed a faint scratching sound coming from the guest room. She peeked in and saw a black and white cat lounging on the windowsill. It blinked at her lazily, completely at home. "You have a cat?" she asked when Jace walked by. He glanced in. "That's Luna. She hates people." Lena snorted. Seemed like she gets it from her owner. To her shock, he laughed. Not a sarcastic huff, but a real laugh, deep and quiet. "Careful, Lena. You're breaking all my rules." She looked at him curiously. "And what exactly are those rules?" He didn't answer. He just stared at her, long enough to make her forget the question entirely. The days blurred, but Lena couldn't deny it. Something was changing. Jay still wasn't what you'd call warm, but the edges of his frost had started to thaw. His once curt instructions were now laced with subtle humor, and his presence no longer made her tense. In fact, she caught herself waiting for it, looking for it. That afternoon, as she cleaned the windows in the foyer, a delivery man approached the door. Lena answered, assuming it was another package for Jace. The man smiled at her, friendly and casual. "Delivery from Mr. Caldwell," he said, handing over a sleek white box. "Thanks," she replied. He lingered, eyeing her curiously. "You his assistant or something?" "Cleaner," she said, tucking the box under her arm. "Ah, I see. Well, he's lucky, pretty, and hardworking. Rare combo." Lena flushed slightly, chuckling awkwardly. Before she could reply, a deep voice cut through the hallway. "Is there a problem?" Jay stood at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The delivery man straightened instantly. "No problem, sir. Just dropping off your order." Jace took the box from Lena without a word and shut the door behind the man with a little too much force. She tilted her head at him, amused. "Something wrong?" He looked at her, jaw tight. "You let strangers talk to you like that?" "It wasn't a crime. He was just being nice." "He was flirting." She shrugged. "Maybe." "So?" Jace didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked off, muttering, "I'll talk to the security team about that entrance." Lena stared after him, a smile tugging at her lips. "So he was paying attention. Good to know." The house felt unusually quiet that evening. Lena was finishing up the last of her tasks in the dining room when she noticed something odd. An extra place set at the long mahogany table, 1 silver plate, 2 wine glasses, linen napkins folded with precision. She turned toward the kitchen and found Jace standing there, sleeves rolled up, stirring something on the stove. It smelled like garlic, rosemary, and surprise. "You cook now?" she asked, raising a brow. He did look up. "I always cook, just never for anyone else." Lena leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Interesting. So, who's the lucky guest tonight?" His eyes finally met hers. "You." She blinked. "Me?" Jace set down the spoon and wiped his hands. "You've been working hard. Thought you deserved something other than packaged sandwiches and cold coffee. Sit." Lena hesitated. This wasn't in the job description, but neither was him pouring her coffee or laughing at her jokes or glaring at delivery men for smiling at her. Slowly, she took the seat he pointed at. He served 2 plates of roasted chicken, vegetables, and mashed potatoes. Simple but perfectly done. He poured wine next, then sat across from her with the same serious expression he always wore, except softer. "You've surprised me, Lena." She looked up mid-bite. "How so?" "You didn't flinch when I barked at you. You didn't try to impress me. You just did your job and somehow made this house feel less empty." A quiet stretched between them. The storm outside had cleared, but something else was building in the air. "You're not what I expected either," she said. He gave a rare half smile. "Good. Expectations are boring." And just like that, dinner for one became something neither of them could quite define, but neither wanted to end. Lena showed up the next morning with her hair tied up and a fresh resolve in her chest. Whatever that dinner was last night, it wasn't happening again. She was the cleaner. He was the boss. That was the line, and lines were meant to be respected. She moved quickly through her routine, avoiding rooms he might be in, but her plan crumbled the moment she walked into the laundry room and found Jace already there, leaning against the dryer with a cup of coffee. 2 cups, actually. "One for you," he said, holding it out. She hesitated. "I think we're crossing into weird territory." "Weird how?" "I clean your house. You don't wine and dine your cleaner, and you definitely don't make her coffee the next day." "Huh?" He didn't flinch. "Why not?" "Because people will talk, because it's unprofessional, because it's confusing." Jay studied her face for a long moment before stepping closer, coffee still in hand. He didn't touch her, just stood there, close enough for her to feel the heat off him, smell the faint notes of cedar wood and cologne. "Let them talk," he said softly. "I don't care about lines if you're the one on the other side of them." Her breath caught, but she took the cup anyway, fingers brushing his. Electricity pulsed through the contact. "You're really not making this easier," she muttered, sipping to hide the blush crawling up her neck. "I'm not trying to," Jace replied, his voice low. "I'm just being honest. For once, she stared at him, heart racing, mind spinning. This wasn't the plan, but maybe the plan had changed. And the line she was trying so hard to keep, it was already blurring. That afternoon, Lena found herself in the sunroom, polishing the glass panels that wrapped around the walls. The light filtered in gently, casting golden streaks across the floor. It should have been calming, but her thoughts were far from still. Every word Jace had said replayed in her head like a loop she couldn't escape. She wasn't naive. She'd dealt with charming men before, men who flirted when it was convenient, who smiled when they needed something, but Jace was different. He wasn't charming, he wasn't smooth, he was honest. And worse, she was starting to believe him. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her back to the present. Jace entered, no tie today, shirt partially unbuttoned at the top, and his ever-present watch glinting under the sun. "You're avoiding me," he said plainly. "I'm working," she replied, keeping her eyes on the glass. "You're always working, but you never looked this tense before." She paused, cloth frozen mid-wipe. "I just need clarity, Jace." "Clarity? What is this?" she asked, finally turning to face him. "One minute you're cold and unreachable, the next you're pouring me coffee and setting a place at your table. I can't do confusion, Jace, not in my life right now." His jaw clenched slightly, but his eyes softened. "I don't know what this is yet, Lena, but I know what it isn't. It's not a game. I don't do games." She stared at him, unsure if she should be relieved or terrified. "I'm not asking for a relationship. I just don't want to be another lonely voice echoing through this house," he said quietly. The wall she had so carefully built around her heart shifted, not crumbling yet, but cracking. And somehow, she didn't feel the need to patch him back up. That Friday, Lena stayed longer than usual. The rain had started again, heavy and unrelenting, and Jace insisted she wait it out instead of trying to catch a bus in the storm. "I'll have the driver take you when it clears," he said casually, pouring himself a second glass of wine. She sat in the corner of the living room, still unsure if she should be there. She wasn't cleaning anymore, just present. The fire crackled softly between them, casting warm shadows on his face. "You know, this is the most time I've spent with another human in months," he said, swirling his glass. "That's both sad and impressive," she replied. "Impressive that you've survived it." He smirked. "Most people don't want to be around me. They think I'm too much." "You are too much," Lena teased and added more softly. "But I've seen worse." He looked at her for a moment. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" She nodded, hesitating. "Lost my mom at 19, worked 2 jobs since, been through a few broken promises. Nothing I can't survive." He set his glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You ever think about giving up?" "Every day, but I wake up anyway." That's the deal. His expression shifted, less guarded, more human. "Lena, I don't think you're just surviving anymore." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I think you're helping me survive." For a long second, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain softening outside. When the fire cracked loudly, she jumped slightly and then laughed. He chuckled too, and suddenly the heaviness between them gave way to something lighter, sweeter. That night, she didn't leave until after midnight. And it wasn't just the storm that made her stay. The following Monday, Lena arrived at the Caldwell mansion to find the energy in the air oddly different. The staff, namely the gardener and part-time cook, were lingering near the entrance when she walked in. Both nodded politely, but their eyes flickered with silent curiosity. She brushed it off and got to work, but by midday, when the cook brought in groceries, she finally said it. "You know people are starting to talk, right?" Lena raised a brow. "About what?" "About you and him," she said, jerking her head in the direction of Jace's office. "I mean, he hasn't let anyone in that close since her." Lena's stomach twisted. She hadn't asked much about Jace's past. She'd only heard whispers. The woman in the photo, the one he kept face down, must have been someone important. Maybe even irreplaceable. "Nothing's happening," Lena replied quickly. "I'm just the cleaner." The cook smiled knowingly. "Sure you are." Later that day, Lena found Jace in the library, scribbling notes on a large architectural blueprint. She cleared her throat. "Do you know people are gossiping about us?" He didn't look up. "Let them. It could affect your reputation," she said carefully. Jace finally met her gaze, firm and unwavering. "I'm not ashamed of anything, especially not you." Lena's breath caught. He said it so plainly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But I am worried about you, he added. You didn't sign up for this mess. She stepped closer, voice low. Maybe I didn't, but I'm not running from it either. He watched her for a moment, then smiled, one of those rare, soft smiles that only appeared when he forgot to hide. That smile made the rumors worth it. Every single one. The next day began like any other. Lena arrived early, swept through the foyer, and started dusting the picture frames in the hallway. But everything felt different, charged. Every word spoken between them lately carried weight. Every silence even heavier. Jace passed by her twice that morning, each time slowing just slightly, like he wanted to say something. The third time, he finally stopped. You missed a spot, he said, gesturing toward the high corner of the frame. Lena rolled her eyes. Then maybe you should hire someone taller. He stepped closer, eyes gleaming. Or maybe I just wanted an excuse to talk to you. Her heart stuttered, but she kept wiping the frame. You don't need an excuse, Jace. Their eyes met. The tension thickened. Then why do I feel like I'm not allowed to say what I want? She turned to face him fully. Say it then. He stepped into her space, just enough to make her breath hitch. His hand reached out slowly, cautiously, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingertips lingered just a second too long. I want to touch you without making you feel like you have to run. Lena didn't move. She didn't speak. She just looked up at him, heart pounding. I want to earn whatever's happening here, he added. A silence fell. Her skin tingled where he'd touched her. You're not scaring me, Jace, she whispered. His eyes softened. Good, because the truth is, Lena, you're the first person who's made this place feel less like a cage. She nodded slowly, pulse racing, and you're the first person who's made me feel seen. His hand fell back to his side, but the connection didn't break. It deepened, quietly, powerfully, inevitably. It had been a quiet afternoon until Lena accidentally opened the wrong door. She'd been searching for clean towels when she stepped into a room that immediately felt haunted. Soft beige curtains, a vanity untouched, a pair of heels still beneath the armchair. She realized instantly this was her room. The woman in the photo? Jace's late wife. Lene stood frozen, heart in her throat. The room smelled faintly of perfume and memory. Everything was preserved like a shrine, untouched, unlived in, and deeply sacred. She stepped back, careful not to disturb a single thing, when suddenly, what are you doing in here? Jace's voice cracked through the silence like thunder. Lena turned, startled. I didn't mean to. You shouldn't be in here, he snapped, stepping forward, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. I know, I was just looking for towels. The door was open, Jace. I wasn't snooping. He stopped, breathing hard, as though the air in the room hurt to inhale. For a long moment, he said nothing. She waited. Finally, he spoke, softly. This was Emily's room. I haven't touched it since she passed. I nodded slowly. I figured. He rubbed a hand down his face, suddenly looking older, tired. I tried to pack it away once. I couldn't do it, so I just closed the door. Until today. Lena stepped toward him, voice gentle. You don't have to apologize. You loved her. That's not something you need to hide. Jace looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, Lena saw it. The grief still flickering beneath all that strength. But so was something else. And it was looking at her. That evening, the silence in the house wasn't uncomfortable. It was electric. Lena stayed later than usual, partly because of the rain, but mostly because neither of them seemed ready for her to leave. They sat in the kitchen, across from each other, sipping tea like two people trying to delay the inevitable. Jace watched her over the rim of his cup. You're not afraid of my past, are you? No, she replied softly, but I'm not here to compete with it either. You're not a replacement, Lena. You're different. She placed her cup down, her fingers tightening slightly. Then tell me what this is between us. Jay stood slowly, walked around the island, and stopped in front of her chair. His eyes searched hers, voice low. I don't know how to do this, not with you, not after everything. She looked up at him, her voice just above a whisper. Then don't do anything. Just be honest. He reached out and brushed his knuckles along her cheek, gently, reverently. Her breath caught. You scare me, Lena. Because I want to let you in. The moment hung between them, thick with tension. He leaned in slowly, eyes on her lips, and for one suspended second, their faces were inches apart. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The air shifted, her lips parted. But he stopped. Not yet, he murmured, stepping back. If I kiss you now? I won't stop. Lena swallowed hard, breath shaky. And if I don't want you to stop? He looked at her with that same intensity, equal parts restraint and longing. Then I'll need to be sure you won't walk away. And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her trembling, breathless, and wanting more than she ever expected. That night, sleep didn't come easy for Lena. Her mind kept drifting back to Jace, his touch, his words, the almost kiss that still burned on her skin. She had come into this job needing a paycheck, not an entanglement with a man haunted by a past love and guarded by steel walls. But now she was in too deep. The next day, she arrived earlier than scheduled, hoping to find clarity in the silence of the house. Instead, she found Jace standing barefoot in the kitchen, shirt rumpled, coffee in hand, like he hadn't slept either. You were early, he said, eyes scanning her face. Couldn't sleep, she replied honestly. Same. They stood there for a beat, the silence between them heavier than usual, but not uncomfortable, familiar even. I've been thinking, Jay said suddenly, maybe we should stop. Lena blinked. Stop what? The dinners, the looks, the tension. It's not fair to you. She stepped forward, folding her arms. What if I don't want to stop? His jaw tightened. Lena. No, listen, I'm not naive. I know you're not over her, but I'm not here to replace her. I'm here because I choose to be. You can either let yourself feel again, or you can keep pretending you're fine alone. He stared at her, jaw twitching, chest rising and falling with quiet restraint. Then, without warning, he crossed the space between them, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. Hard, desperate, aching. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. When they pulled apart, breathless, he whispered against her lips, I've crossed every line I set for myself with you. Lena's fingers gripped his shirt. Then maybe those lines were never real to begin with. The kiss had changed everything. Lena couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Couldn't pretend her heart wasn't now dangerously invested in a man she'd once labeled untouchable. She'd barely slept after leaving his house that night. Every inch of her skin still hummed with the memory of his lips, his hands, the way he whispered her name like it was sacred. But now came the hard part. What happened next? When she arrived the following morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No coffee waiting, no post-it notes, no Jace leaning against the counter pretending not to care. Just silence. Empty and loud. She moved cautiously through the rooms until she found him in the library, staring out the window, unreadable. Morning, she said gently. He turned, eyes guarded. Morning. So, are we just gonna pretend that didn't happen? He exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easy it would be to pull you into this house and never let you go. Her heart fluttered, but she said nothing. But I also kept thinking about how selfish that would be, he continued. I'm still figuring myself out, Lena. There's a part of me that's still broken. That room upstairs, that's not just hers. It's a piece of me I haven't let go of. She stepped closer. I don't need you perfect, Jace. I just need you present. He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time there was no wall, no mask, no coldness. Just a man afraid of loving again. Then stay, he said softly. I don't know what this is, Lena, but I want to find out. With you. She smiled, heart finally steady. Then I guess we both have something to learn. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Lena still cleaned, but now there were moments, quiet, stolen moments, where Jace would find her, brush past her a little too closely, whisper things that made her cheeks warm, or steal a kiss in rooms where the walls had once known only silence. It felt like they were building something uneven, fragile, but real. That was, until the doorbell rang. Lena was vacuuming the hallway when the chime echoed through the house. She paused and glanced toward the front entrance. Jace wasn't in sight, so she went to answer it. When she opened the door, a tall, elegant woman in a trench coat stood there, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and a smirk tugging at her lips. "You must be the cleaner," she said, looking Lena up and down. "Is Jace home?" Lena hesitated. "And you are?" The woman raised a brow, amused. "Tessa Langford, his ex-fiancée." Lena's stomach dropped. Before she could respond, Jace appeared behind her, his voice cool. "Tessa, what are you doing here?" Tessa's smirk widened. You didn't return my calls." "I was in the area. Thought I'd drop by." Lena instinctively took a step back, heart thudding. Tessa glanced between them, sensing the shift. "Oh, interesting. You've moved on fast." Jace stepped forward. "You don't belong here anymore, Tessa. This isn't your home." Tessa's smile faltered, but only slightly. "We'll see about that." She handed him an envelope, gave Lena one last icy glance, then turned and walked away like she owned the world. Lena stared at the closed door, mind racing. Jace looked at her and whispered, "I didn't think she'd ever come back." But she had, and she didn't look like someone who planned to leave quietly. The envelope Tessa left sat untouched on Jace's desk for the rest of the day. Lena tried not to let it get to her, but the silence was deafening. Jace hadn't spoken more than a few words since the visit. He was locked in his office now, brooding in shadows, and Lena was left scrubbing spotless countertops, just to feel useful. She hated the way her chest twisted. She wasn't his girlfriend. There was no title, no claim, but after everything they'd shared, the glances, the kiss, the confessions, Tessa's arrival felt like a slap. By late afternoon, she finally knocked on the door. "Come in," he said quietly. Lena stepped in, arms folded. "Are we going to talk about it?" Jace looked up, eyes tired. "Nothing to talk about. She's from a life I buried years ago." "You were engaged to her, Jace. That's not nothing." His expression hardened. "I ended it. For a good reason." Lena moved closer, voice tight. "And what reason was that?" Jace stood up slowly, walking toward the window. "She cheated. Repeatedly. She was more in love with my money than with me. I left her. Not the other way around." Lena's breath caught. "Oh." "She showed up today because she wants something. That's all. Whatever it is, I'm not giving it to her." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been clawing at her since the door closed behind Tessa. "Are you still in love with her?" He turned, eyes blazing. "No. But that doesn't mean her showing up didn't rattle me. She represents the worst version of my past, and I don't want that spilling into what we have now." Lena nodded slowly, trying to steady her heart. "Then say it, Jace. Say that what we have means something." He crossed the room and cupped her face gently. "It does, more than you know." But outside, thunder rumbled again, warning them that some storms don't pass so easily. The next morning, the house felt heavier. Jace left early for a last-minute board meeting, leaving Lena alone in the mansion. She told herself to focus on her work, to not obsess over the envelope still sealed on his desk, or the fact that his ex-fiancée walked in like she still had keys to his heart. But the silence, it pushed at her. Around noon, Luna the cat trotted into the office, batting at the edge of the envelope. It fluttered to the floor. Lena sighed, walked over to retrieve it, and froze. The flap had come undone. She shouldn't look. She shouldn't. But her eyes flicked down, and the words leapt out before she could stop herself. Prenuptial agreement, Caldwell and Langford. Drafted proposal for wedding rescheduling. Bank transfer confirmation, $750,000. Lena's blood ran cold. She backed away from the desk as if the papers might burn her. The documents weren't old. The dates were from last week. Before the kiss. Before the confessions. Before everything. The front door opened, and Jace's voice rang through the foyer. Lena stood still as he entered, shrugging off his coat. "Hey, I didn't expect you to still be here." She turned, eyes wide, betrayal thick in her voice. "Why is there a wedding proposal with your ex-fiancé's name on your desk?" He blinked. "What?" "Don't lie to me, Jace. I saw the papers. Dates from last week. You were planning to marry her again?" His face dropped. "No. Lena, listen to me. That's not what you think." Then explain fast. He stepped toward her, voice low. "She sent that. She did. I didn't agree to anything. That's how she operates. Throwing things in front of me, hoping I'll slip back into old patterns." She searched his face, heart pounding. You swear? On everything I am, he whispered. I only want you. But the truth was, doubt had already crept in, and even love struggled to grow in poisoned soil. Lena didn't return the next day. She called in claiming she needed rest, but really, she just couldn't face him. Her heart was a battlefield, torn between what she wanted to believe and what her eyes had seen. She kept replaying the moment she read those documents, the sting of betrayal biting deeper each time. He said he didn't send them, said they were Tessa's doing. But if that were true, why hadn't he destroyed them the moment he saw them? Why did they still exist in his house? Lena sat curled up in her tiny apartment, watching the rain smear across the windows. It was quieter here, but also colder, emptier. For all the confusion and danger of Jace's world, his presence had made her feel seen, chosen. Now, she felt like a placeholder in someone else's unfinished story. Her phone buzzed. Jay's message read, I miss you. Let me explain. Let me prove it. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. A part of her ached to respond, to run back, to fall into his arms and let it all disappear. But she didn't. Instead, she called the cleaning agency and requested a transfer. 1 week, she told herself. 1 week away from that house, and maybe she'd be able to breathe again. But what she didn't know, what he didn't tell her, was that Jace hadn't just been waiting, but he had been searching. Calling the agency, tracking her address, standing outside her building that very night, soaked by the rain, holding on to the last shred of hope that she'd open the door. And when she finally peeked through the curtain and saw him, she froze. Because even drenched and silent, Jace looked like a man who'd never begged for anything until now. Lena's heart hammered as she watched Jace standing on the sidewalk, rain slicking his dark curls, his clothes clinging to him. He didn't have an umbrella, no driver, no polished suit of armor, just him, bare, raw, and waiting. She hesitated. Logic screamed at her to walk away. But love whispered, open the door. Moments later, the lock clicked, and Lena opened it, arms folded tightly over her chest. Her voice was quiet, trembling. You shouldn't be here. Jace's eyes met hers, unblinking. I had to see you. You wouldn't answer. You left without letting me fix this. You lied to me. I didn't, he said firmly. I swear, Lena, Tessa sent those papers to pressure me. I never agreed to anything. The second I saw them, I planned to burn them, but you walked in before I could. She looked away, pain tightening her throat. But you didn't tell me. You just stood there and let the doubt grow. He stepped forward, voice lower, because I was afraid. Afraid that no matter what I said, you'd still believe she had a chance. Afraid that you'd look at me the way you're looking at me now. She swallowed hard, her voice cracking. How am I looking at you? Like you don't know if I'm worth the risk. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his soaked one. But I'm gonna ask you to take it anyway. Because what I feel for you, it's not some rebound or distraction, it's real. And I'm not losing you because of a woman I left years ago. Lena searched his face. There was no mask, no ice, just truth. Finally, she whispered, You break me, Jace Caldwell. Then she pulled him inside and closed the door behind him. The door closed with a soft click, muffling the sound of the rain. Inside it was warm, but it wasn't the apartment that held the heat. It was them. Jay stood in the center of Lena's tiny living room, dripping water onto the floor, eyes locked on hers like he was scared to blink. She moved first, walking past him toward the linen closet, grabbing a towel and handing it to him silently. He took it, drying his face and hair, never breaking eye contact. You really showed up here in the middle of a storm? She asked quietly. He half smiled. I would have come through a hurricane if I thought it would make you listen. Lena turned away, nervous energy humming through her. I'm still scared, Jace. So am I. She looked at him, startled. He stepped closer. I've lost before. I've loved and watched it fall apart. But this, you, it feels different. Like I can finally breathe again. Lena's voice cracked. And what if we fall apart too? And then at least we'll know we tried, not ran. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. His touch was gentle, but his grip was certain. Lena took a shaky breath. I don't have a mansion or money. I barely have enough space in my fridge for leftovers. He smiled softly. I don't want your fridge, Lena. I want your heart. Tears welled in her eyes. And with no more words left to say, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, slow, deep, sure. It was no longer a kiss filled with hesitation or longing. It was a kiss of choice, of two broken people choosing to be whole together, no matter how messy the road ahead. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the window blinds of Lena's small bedroom. Her apartment, normally quiet and still, now held a gentle sound of slow breathing. Jace's. He lay beside her, shirtless beneath the blanket, one arm draped loosely over her waist. Lena woke first. For a long moment, she just watched him. His sharp jaw softened in sleep. His usual intensity melted into calm. Vulnerable. Real. It was a side of him few people probably ever saw, and yet he'd given it to her. Carefully, she slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen to start the coffee. She needed time to think, to breathe. Everything had changed in a matter of days. The man who once barked orders and gave her cleaning instructions had now held her like she was the only thing in his world that mattered. Was she ready for that kind of pressure? For his world? Just as she poured 2 mugs, she felt arms wrap around her waist from behind. His voice, still husky from sleep, murmured against her neck. You weren't going to leave me alone in that bed, were you? She smiled. You looked too peaceful to disturb. He turned her gently to face him. And you look like someone who's trying to run away in her own kitchen. I'm not running, Jace. I'm processing. Fair. But while you're processing, just know I'm not going anywhere. She held his gaze, her voice soft. Then promise me one thing. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to do this, we do it with everything on the table. He nodded, his expression firm. Done. And with that promise sealed between 2 steaming cups of coffee, Lena realized this wasn't just the end of the storm. It was the beginning of their sunrise. Later that week, Lena stood at the mansion's front door, feeling more like a guest than a staff member. It was surreal, walking in without her cleaning supplies, no to-do list, no gloves or apron, just herself. Jace greeted her at the door with a small smirk. You're 5 minutes early. Old habits die hard. She chuckled. Force of habit, yes, but I'm not here to vacuum. He stepped aside, letting her in. Good, because I have something to show you. The house felt different, warmer, cozier. There were fresh flowers in the entryway. A soft candle scent lingered in the air. She followed him into the living room where something on the coffee table caught her attention. A sealed envelope. She looked at him cautiously. If that's another letter from Tessa, I swear. It's not, he interrupted gently, picking it up and handing it to her. It's your contract. Termination. Lena blinked. What? You're officially no longer employed here? I'm hiring a full cleaning service? You were never just a cleaner, Lena. Not to me. And I don't want to blur lines anymore. I want them gone. Her heart pounded as she opened the envelope. A formal letter, signed and stamped, releasing her from her cleaning duties effective immediately. This feels big, she whispered. It is big, Jay said, stepping closer, because I don't want you to keep walking through that door feeling like you work for me. I want you walking in because you chose to. Lena looked up at him, eyes wide. So what am I now? He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. You're mine, Lena, if you'll have me. And as her arms slid around his waist, she knew she already had. Just as Lena was settling into her new role, not as an employee but as Jace's partner, life reminded her that peace rarely lasted long. She was in the kitchen one morning, humming as she prepared breakfast, when the security gate buzzer rang unexpectedly. Jace frowned, checking his phone. No appointments today. He walked to the front door and glanced at the camera monitor. His face hardened. Tessa. Lena froze mid-pour. Seriously? I told her to stop coming, he muttered, jaw tight. Stay here. I'll handle it. Lena followed anyway, lingering by the hallway as he opened the door. Tessa stood there, in oversized sunglasses and a tailored coat, a rehearsed sorrow draped across her expression. Jace, I just need 5 minutes. No, he said firmly. There's nothing left to say. She glanced past him, spotting Lena in the distance. So she is living here now. Tessa, leave. But she stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from her purse. You may think you've moved on, Jace, but I haven't signed the NDA. And if you don't talk to me, I will talk to the press. Everything, your breakdown after Emily, your therapy records, our engagement, all of it. Lena's breath caught. Jace's voice was ice. You'd threaten me? After everything? I'm not threatening you. I'm reminding you I was there before her. Before her. You owe me at least a conversation. Lena stepped forward now, voice clear. No, he doesn't owe you anything. You broke his heart, and you don't get to knock on this door and pretend you didn't. Tessa stared, stunned. You're not part of his future, Lena added. I am. Jace's eyes flicked to her, proud, full of something deeper than admiration. Tessa turned without another word, and this time, she didn't look back. Later that day, the tension finally began to thaw. Jace had gone quiet after Tessa's dramatic exit, processing, brooding, protective as ever. Lena, meanwhile, was pacing through the living room, unable to shake the nerves clinging to her chest. You okay? She finally asked, settling beside him on the couch. He nodded slowly. Yeah, just furious that she had the nerve to bring up the NDA and the press, but I'm glad you stood up to her. Lena shrugged. Someone had to. She kept trying to rewrite the past like she owned it. Jace looked at her, something burning in his gaze. You keep surprising me, you know that? Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced down at it, then frowned. What is it? She asked. He sighed. That was my PR manager. A journalist from Elite Weekly wants to do a feature on me, business profile, but apparently they caught wind of some personal changes too. Lena stiffened. Me? Maybe. They asked for comment on Tessa, the canceled engagement, and the mystery woman staying at the Caldwell estate. Lena swallowed. Are you going to do it? I said I'd think about it. But only if you're okay with it. She hesitated. I'm not used to being in the spotlight, Jace, and you won't have to say a word. But I also won't lie to the world about you, not after everything we've been through. Lena bit her lip, torn. He reached for her hand. I want to tell them the truth, that I met someone who changed my life, and she did it without asking for anything. She blinked back emotion. If you're sure, then tell them. Tell them everything. And for the first time in years, Jace Caldwell prepared to tell the world about something real. The article dropped 3 days later. From empire to intimacy, the man behind Caldwell Tech opens up. Read the headline. It wasn't scandalous, it wasn't gossipy, it was honest, brutally so. Jay spoke openly about his past, his grief, and the way his home had become a hollow mansion after Emily's passing. But more importantly, he talked about Lena. She walked in to clean floors, the article quoted him, and ended up clearing space in my life I didn't know was cluttered. She didn't rescue me. She reminded me I could rescue myself if I chose to start again. Lena read the piece with trembling hands, curled up on Jace's office couch, blinking rapidly as her name appeared across national platforms, not as an accessory, not as gossip, but as something rare, loved. Jace walked in moments later holding 2 mugs of tea. You read it? She nodded, breath shaky. You didn't have to say all that. I wanted to. I needed to. She set the tablet down and took the tea, her voice quiet. What if the world doesn't like it? What if people think I'm using you? Then let them. I know the truth. You know the truth. And that's enough? He moved closer, his voice steady. It's everything. They stood in silence for a beat before he added, you've given me something no amount of money ever could. What? A reason to come home? Lena felt the weight of the words settle in her chest. Beautiful. Permanent. Let them talk. Let the world spin. Because what they had was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was standing proudly in the light. It had been weeks since the article, and life had shifted into something Lena never thought she'd have. Peaceful, loving, real. She no longer walked into the mansion with gloves and cleaning spray. She walked in with purpose, with belonging. She was no longer the cleaner. She was his. But Jace had been acting strange all day, checking his watch, pacing, double-checking rooms that didn't need anything checked. Lena noticed but didn't press, until he asked her to meet him in the garden at sunset. That garden, she later realized, had been transformed. Soft fairy lights hung from the trees, candles flickered along the stone path, and at the center, under a blooming archway, Jace stood, nervous, but Lance stepped into the glow, heart pounding. What is this? He took her hand, eyes full of every word he hadn't yet spoken. This is me choosing you. Fully, forever, no hesitation, no past holding me back, just you. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Lena gasped, hand flying to her chest. Jace dropped to one knee, voice steady despite the tremble in his fingers. You walked into my life to clean my house, but instead you cleared the dust off my soul. I never knew love could look like you. Strong, soft, fierce, and loyal. I never want a day without you in it. He opened the box. Inside, a simple, elegant diamond ring gleamed under the garden lights. Lena Harper, will you marry me? Her eyes welled, breath caught, lips trembling. She whispered the only word that ever mattered. Yeah. And in that moment, every line they'd ever crossed faded, leaving only love, unshaken and true. The wedding was small, just the way Lena wanted it. Held in the very garden where Jace had proposed, the evening glowed with candlelight, laughter, and the quiet wonder of two lives finally joining. There was no fancy orchestra, no red carpet press, just their closest circle, soft piano music, and vows spoken beneath the same arch where everything had changed. Lena walked down the aisle in a sleek ivory gown, her natural curls tucked gently into a crown braid. Her eyes never left Jace's, dressed in a charcoal suit, waiting at the end of the aisle like she was the only thing that had ever made sense to him. When she reached him, he whispered with a smile, "You look like the answer to a prayer I didn't know I asked for." Tears slipped down her cheek as they began their vows. "I came into your life through a back door," Lena said, voice trembling. "I never expected love. I just needed work. But what I found was a man who saw me, who saw past my past. You didn't rescue me. You chose me. And now I choose you." Jace's voice cracked as he responded, "You weren't part of the plan. You were the interruption that saved my life. You turned a cold, quiet house into a home. And I promise every day from now on, I'll earn your love the way you earned mine." By being real, they sealed it with a kiss that felt like a lifetime in the making. From the girl who once scrubbed his floors to the woman who now wore his ring, Mrs. Lena Caldwell was no longer just part of his story. She was his forever.